Hello everyone, my name is Laura and I'm with Tidelines Institute. Today we're here with Hoona Indian Association and Hoona Heritage Foundation, and we're going to teach you how to make kelp pickles. Bull kelp, Su in Tlingit or Nereocystis lutkeana in Latin, grows abundantly in our inside waters here in southeast Alaska, and midsummer is the perfect time to harvest and process it. So here we go! You can find kelp forests along the coast just below the intertidal zones. All common Alaska seaweeds are non-toxic. The greatest dangers to seaweed edibility are man-made. When seeking possible beaches for harvesting, assess the quality of the water. Look for any sewer or stormwater outfalls, old industrial sites, chemical spills, or logging dumps in the immediate area that would contaminate the seaweed. Bull kelp can grow up to 10 inches in a day and can grow as much as 100 feet in its lifetime. Midsummer, like June and July, is the best time to harvest bull kelp. The year's new growth is big and healthy by then, but it hasn't accumulated too many of the little crusty growths it'll get by fall time. We're looking for nice, fat, smooth pieces of kelp. From your canoe, kayak, or skiff, you can take hold of a piece, raise it up out of the water, and cut where it starts to taper. Then, making sure you've got a good grip, you cut off the bulb and fronds. Don't cut the bulb off first, as it allows you to get a good grip. I've lost a lot of nice pieces of kelp doing that, and it slides right out of your hand and sinks down. The stipe, which is the narrow part, and then also... It is difficult to gauge how much kelp you need for a batch, but it's less than you think. We're making quite a big batch right now to share with the Hoona community, but for a normal batch, you would want about a gallon sliced. That's probably about 6 to 8 stipes, depending on how long they are. We're making a double batch, and we'll get a little extra. And if you end up with leftover kelp, it is a great fertilizer for the garden. Keep in mind that bullwhip kelp is one of the giant kelps that make up the great kelp forests, places that are home to many species, including sea otters, crabs, fish, and other ocean creatures. Removing too much will result in the destruction of important habitat. Only take as much as you need. While bull kelp is edible and nutritious, it is an important part of the ocean ecosystem. So, once we have our kelp, take it back home and give it a good rinse. If there are any little crusty bits growing on it, you can scrape or cut those off, and the kelp will still be fine. Bull kelp is low in fat, relatively high in protein, and very high in potassium, sodium, iodine, and magnesium. Bull kelp is also a good source of dietary fiber. There are many different ways to make kelp pickles. Some people like chunks, some people like slices, some people like savory, kosher, dill-style pickles, and some people like sweet bread and butter pickles. Today, we're going to be making sweet bread and butter kelp pickle slices, in part because it goes so wonderfully with our other local foods, whether stirred into fresh pack for salmon spread or used as a condiment on deer burgers. Next, we make the brine. In a large pot, mix 2 quarts of apple cider vinegar, 8 cups of white sugar, 2 tablespoons salt, 6 to 8 bay leaves, and 3 tablespoons each of mustard seed, coriander seed, celery seed, and turmeric. Set the pot over high heat and bring it to a boil, stirring occasionally to make sure the sugar and salt dissolve. While the brine is heating, cut the kelp into slices until you have a gallon of sliced kelp. This should be about 8 2 to 3 foot lengths, but it can vary a lot based by thickness. Again, any extra kelp can go on the garden, or you can make additional kelp pickles or kelp salsa. Thinly slice or dice your onions till you also have about a gallon. If you have a food processor, this can make the whole thing go very fast. At this point, you can experiment with different consistencies for your pickles. For instance, instead of slices, we often make pickle relish too, using the same recipe. And, just so you know, I never fret too much about exact proportions. If you end up with a little extra kelp or onion or spice in there, no big deal. So once the brine is at a boil, add the kelp and onion. Return the mixture to a boil, stirring occasionally, and simmer until the onions have lost their bite. When you add the kelp, you'll also see that it momentarily turns bright green. This is because the heat destroys the xanthophylls, the yellow and brown pigments in the seaweed, leaving the chlorophylls, the green pigments, more visible. Yay, science! All that said, because of the turmeric in the brine, the whole mixture will soon take on a yellow color again, so there you go. So once the mixture has simmered and the onions are soft, we're ready to jar the pickles. Make sure your jars are clean and the lids are warmed up in a saucepan full of warm water. Then, using a canning funnel and a ladle, we'll spoon the pickles and brine into each jar. We want to make sure that the pickles and brine come up to the lower rim on the jar, leaving about a 1/4 inch of headspace, the air pocket between the top of the pickles and the top of the jar. We need this in order to ensure a good seal. Next, we wipe the rim of the jar with a damp paper towel, place a lid on top, and screw a ring down until it's about finger tight. Once all our jars are filled, we'll put them in a pot full of hot water, bring it up to a boil, and let it boil for 10 minutes. This step is called processing in a hot water bath. It helps sterilize the jars and create a good vacuum seal, allowing these to be shelf stable. If you're doing multiple layers of jars, it's important to have a rack in between them. Once they've boiled for about 10 minutes, we take them off the heat and remove the jars from the hot water using a jar grabber. As they cool, a vacuum seal will form, making a characteristic clinking or popping noise as the seal pops down. And then they're done! They just need to cool to room temperature and they're ready to go on your shelf. Any that don't seal can go in your fridge and should stay good for at least a week or two. And there you have it!